Final member for Hastings, Lennox Annington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a privilege actually to rise on this issue, and I understand that the opinion counter this bill is not as numerous as the opinions in favor of it, but they're nonetheless no less important. And, when I was watching the debate ensue in committee, I was not a part of the committee, but as an interested parliamentarian, I watched all of it. And the debate in committee with respect to witnesses and so forth was rather even-handed, and I didn't count the number of witnesses who raised concerns versus those who were in favor of it. But there was plenty of professionals and others and individual people who brought up real situations which would be technically against the letter of the law, according to this, but I think we would all agree are legitimate sort of concerns. And so I just wanted to, as best as I can, address those today. 10 minutes is not sufficient for that, but I'll do my very best. And of course, time is lacking to do much of what we need to do in this House. But I am, of course, in support of a ban on harmful counseling, but there are many other jurisdictions, governments, cities around the world that have banned conversion therapy, but in a different way, and they have different definitions, which are far less sort of broad, and of course, many of them, if not all, outside of a few, are not criminal in nature. And I think it's problematic when we have a very broad definition that is also criminal, because we want to ban harmful coercive practices, but we don't want to put people in jail that frankly don't deserve to be there. And so, as others have raised before, we want to be entirely certain that what we're targeting is in fact the evil that we're looking to target and not be overbroad in that ban. So I'm a little bit concerned that the assumptions that underpin this bill are faulty, and when some of the assumptions, not all, but some of them are faulty, we can be led astray. And so I just want to take issue with some of them. And so the first is the myth that Bill C6's definition of conversion therapy accurately identifies treatments which will be harmful, and does so in a way which is not overbroad. And I think, of course, that there are abusive practices out there, and I think that we should aim to ban them. But what C6 has done here is to basically, in my view, when you look at the definition, outlaw any validated form of talk therapy for Canadians wishing to deal with various issues related to sexual attraction and gender identity. And for those who would like to look in the proceedings of the committee, there's many examples of very credible witnesses who have gone through circumstances where they needed counseling to address certain things, and their stories are credible. And I don't have time to go through them all, but members can look at them. I also want to say that with respect to transgender identification, particularly in children, there's a conversation going on globally right now that we are missing in this debate on C6. In the UK, the Government Equalities Office, for example, is looking into whether the influence of social media and the discussion of gender identity with young people have contributed to the striking increase in referrals. And when I get into some of the data here on the striking increase, I think we could all agree that there's something here that needs to be looked at. So in the last 10 years, in the United Kingdom, and this mirrors data from other countries, we've seen referrals to these gender clinics skyrocket. We've seen them increase by about 1,000% for boys and 4,400% for biological females. These exponential rises, as I've said, are increasing in other Western nations as well. We heard one of the members earlier speak about the United Kingdom High Court ruling with respect to Kira Bell. Kira Bell is one of the young women who was referred to the Tavistock Institute, which is the clinic there that deals with gender referrals for gender identity. And she was told that, you know, if she went through the process, that she would feel better about herself. So she went on the hormone blockers. She had a double mastectomy. She spent several years living outwardly looking like a man, and she came to regret it. And she's in her early 20s, and she took the Tavistock Institute to court and said, "Listen, I was not given, I was not in a position where I could consent to this treatment. I was basically told that this would be the answer that I needed to my life, and it didn't make anything better. And in fact, it made a lot of things worse. The court ruled that people under 16 could not likely consent to puberty blocking treatment. This bill here does the opposite. This bill says you want to put a child on hormone blockers, if you want to put them on a road to, basically surgery, that's totally fine. But to give them the wrong type of counseling could get you in trouble. And those some people will say, well, listen, there's a clause in this bill that allows you to explore. But the fact is, we heard from very competent professionals in committee that this clause would not be enough when you have potentially a 5-year jail term hanging over your head. We heard from Ken Zucker, who is an internationally renowned expert in gender identity. He basically was, working with our clinic here with CAMH for decades. He's internationally renowned in this field. He's literally written the book on how to treat gender identity in children. He was accused of conversion therapy a few years ago. He was fired from his position summarily, and he had the wherewithal and the resources to take his employer to court. He won a substantial settlement. He cleared his name. But this is the type of thing that we're seeing before C6. So if this is the type of, witch hunt environment that we're seeing before C6, I think it's going to increase significantly with C6. Other than the UK, we're seeing other countries in Europe, Sweden and Finland, have gone even a step further. They're moving away from what is called affirmation-only models of care, which I suggest this is what C6 is. This is what other professionals in committee said about this bill. In Sweden and Finland, they are saying you must give a sober second look when a child identifies as transgender. A sober second look is the very thing that I believe Bill C6 would criminalize. Bill C6 would criminalize parents who want to discourage their young child from transitioning, who would not be making life-altering decisions. And I don't believe it's hateful for a parent to make a decision based on accurate medical facts. When it comes to transgender identification in children, reliable data indicates the vast majority of kids who identify as another gender will grow out of it, meaning by the time they become an adult, many of them, up to 80%, according to some studies, will identify or accept the body they were born with. And I think given data like that, we really need to give a lot of room here for kids, yes, to explore, but not to push them on this one-track mode of, puberty blockers and eventually surgery. And this is what is being criticized by people like Kira Bell. There's an article in the National Post I read a year or so ago by Barbara Kay, and it highlighted the story of a young girl, JB is the acronym, and she is a child that's currently involved in an application in the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. And this involves a teacher in an Ottawa area school who told this 6-year-old that girls don't exist. This 6-year-old, who is, a happy, loving young girl, and I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. The 7 and 5-year-olds are girls. This 6-year-old became distraught, became withdrawn and depressed. She didn't understand what this meant. And the parents asked the teacher if she could just, cool it on some of these, ethereal gender theory comments. The teacher and administration refused to do this. And the parents had to take that girl out of that school. They've moved her to a different school. They've taken this particular school board to court. The girl is, once again, a happy, well-adjusted young girl. But it just goes to show that we have to be careful what we're putting into the minds of our young children. And allowing, what this UK High Court case found is that once you put these kids onto these drugs, these hormone blockers, it pretty much kind of puts them right on the road to surgery. Like it's kind of like a one-track street. And I think we have to be very careful. I think we need to have a sober second look in this country. I'm running out of time here. I'm just going to quickly say that there is, in fact, many people, even in, LGBT communities, which are against this bill. And I'll read you an email I got from a real person that sent to me. They say, Dear Mr. Sloan, as a lesbian, I'm asking you to investigate the use of gender identity in Bill C6. Approximately 75% of trans-identifying youth will grow up to be gay or lesbian if not affirmed and medically transitioned. This bill, as written, ensures that these gay and lesbian youth will be medically transitioned into straight adults. She goes on to say, please protect vulnerable gay and lesbian youth from being told that they are born in the wrong body and told they should transition to feel right and to fit in. Sincerely.
Fortunately, the honourable member's time is up, so I'll have, I'm sure that during questions and comments he'll have a chance to respond. Questions and comments, the honourable member for Peace River Westlock.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the honourable member for his speech on this. One of the things that was notable from the committee was the 300 briefs that were just ignored. I was wondering if the member has any comments about that.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
I actually really appreciate that question. I noted that as well. And I also noted some members of the other parties, I believe a member from the Bloc Québécois, also said, listen, you know, we should spend a little bit of time, even just for the sake of respect for the people that submitted these briefs. And you're right, there were, I think, about 300 or so that came in. They came in sort of at the last minute, and there was not time to translate them. So the committee sort of finished its work on this bill without even looking at those briefs. I think that's problematic. It shows that there was a lot of interest in this bill, and I think we owe it to Canadians to have spent the time to look at it.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for York and Melville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is interesting to hear because the personal and emotional testimonies that I shared in my speech were all of young people who had transitioned in their teens and then realized that gender transition was not a permanent solution to their gender dysphoria in their early 20s and found their worth in their own process of detransition. So clearly there's a concern here, as you've been mentioning, and just wondering if you would expound further on how C6, as currently written, could very well restrict the freedom and respectful and exploratory speech of these individuals with valuable lived experience.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the member for her comment there, and I think it's a really good one. You know, one thing that struck me in the debate on this bill, and of course this was not reflected in committee. I think in committee there was a balanced discussion on many of the issues. There is right now a conversation going on around the world with respect to transgender identification in children. And we have seen, you know, I've heard some members talk about the fact that, you know, a lot of people who transition, you know, a small percentage of them have regrets. I think we're on the tipping point of a big iceberg of sort of regret because, you know, back, you know, 10, 20 years ago, only the funnel for who experienced surgery with respect to transgender changes was a lot narrower. And we're seeing, as I said earlier, this meteoric rise in identification. We're seeing, you know, 1,000% for men, 4,400% for young girls. We're seeing a UK government office do research into, okay, why are we seeing this? So I think the tip of the iceberg of regret is just on the horizon. Thank you so much.
We have time for one more question. The honourable member of Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This member is a neighbouring riding of mine. Certainly he's heard of the experiences at the Third Day Worship Centre in Kingston and what the experiences were of a number of members in that congregation. He will also know probably that the City of Kingston passed a bylaw banning conversion therapy enforceable by a fine, although not a criminal offence. Obviously they can't do that, but they are taking measures, and he talked about what other jurisdictions were doing. Just a quick question to him. Does he agree that that was the right thing for the City of Kingston Council to do?
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
I think that's actually a really good question, and I think it brings up the issue here about what exactly our definition covers. With respect to that particular situation, and I've spoken to the man personally that underwent what happened there in Kingston. I'm not aware of the other cases, but the main person who was testifying there at the City Council. And, you know, with his particular situation, it was very clear that, so to go into it without too much detail, basically he was prayed over in a very public manner. He was advised to take a 3-day fast. You know, these are things that none of us would maybe, you know, agree or advise or anything. But again, when we take a look at what happened to this person, do we believe that the religious leaders of this church should go to jail for 5 years? They prayed over an 18-year-old who was requesting prayer at the time. Now, apparently they embarrassed him. And of course, I don't agree with that. But is it a 5-year jail sentence? These are the questions we need to answer. And when I was speaking to the minister earlier, I said earlier in this session, I said, listen, the Canadian Psychological Association has prayer in their definition. Would this ban prayer? I was told it wouldn't. Thank you, Madam Speaker.